With the latest agriculture news from across the state and nation, it's time for the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. Here's your host, Sabrina Halvorson.
Good morning. Thanks for tuning in on this Monday morning. I am Sabrina Halvorson with Lorrie Warrior here. Morning, Lorrie.
Good morning.
So we have a couple of things going on at USDA this morning that have been going on for a few days. They are bringing back some of the people who are fighting the bird flu. A lot of these people were part of that mass firings from the federal government, and the federal government has gone back and said, oops, maybe we shouldn't have fired all of these people who are doing very important work. And I personally feel like, especially in our agriculture department, maybe we should keep some of those people around. So they are working to rehire a lot of the people involved in this battle that we've been having with the bird flu. Bird flu has been a big problem around the country in the last year.
Yeah, it seems like there's just new stuff popping up on it all the time with going into other species, including dairy cattle, and then the potential for humans to start catching that. Some of the dairy workers have had it, but it sounds like it's just mutating so much. And there is a threat. I even saw some national headlines on that here just yesterday on the potential for it to get bigger and to become more of a problem in the humans. So there's that. But you and I have talked about all the cuts and things that are going on in the Trump administration. So several employees, and I didn't see a specific number. Did you, of employees that were fired?
I have not seen, there has not been a release of an actual specific number. A lot of those details continue to be withheld.
So the Elon Musk part of what he's doing, and as far as going through and looking at everything with a fine tooth comb, especially if anything fell under the Inflation Reduction Act, it seems like they're all getting the axe. So these employees were accidentally fired about a week ago, and now USDA is working to rehire them. I will say, from what I'm reading and seeing, USDA recognized pretty quickly the error and has been quick to get on that. And even Brooke Rollins says that this actually aligns with the Trump administration on trying to handle and mitigate and work on and research bird flu. That's an important priority for the Trump administration. And so Rollins has even come out saying, hey, yeah, this was a mistake. Let's get it fixed quickly and move forward. So I guess the silver lining of the whole thing is USDA did catch this quickly, and hopefully those folks didn't go find another job. And we'll come back. And you and I even talked a little bit about the principle, this whole thing that if you're asked to come back, would you come back?
Yeah.
I hope you do.
And I think so. And I know that you have talked with a lot of researchers like I have. It's part of what we do. And these people are passionate about what they do. They care about their work. Their heart is in it. Let's, make no mistake, they were done wrong. It wasn't, it wasn't an accident. These emails, this mass email sent out to thousands of workers. Somebody didn't accidentally push the send button. This was on purpose. They were fired. They were done wrong. They have the right to say, no, I'm not coming back. But they are passionate people who care about the work they're doing. So I kind of expect that a lot of these researchers will go back to their jobs, just because of the ones who I have talked with, researchers around the nation, who know how important their work is. And it's not just, important in theory. This is extremely important work for all of us around the nation that, is actively needed right now.
You and I think a lot alike, because that's where I was going to head next. So we have a lot of veterinarians, animal health technicians, who else? Other emergency response personnel. And I was going to say the same thing. These are people that are very invested in their work and have put a lot of time and energy into this. And the people that I know that are into research are 110% in. So I suspect that a lot of these folks will come back, and they're all wanting to do this. They're all wanting to try to figure out our response to bird flu. And so I think there might be a couple people that don't, but I think that these people really will want to come back and help.
Yeah, I agree. I think so too. Again, just from the people that we have talked with, it's something that you and I have done for many years, talking with these people. We know them, and they are, again, just very passionate. I still feel very strongly that, I feel bad for them for what they have been going through. because I mean, all of a sudden to have your entire livelihood just taken away from you for no reason, that's a very difficult thing for all of these people and their families to go through. So I wouldn't blame them if they said, no, I think I'm going to stay out of government work for a while. But in a lot of cases, where else are you going to do this research? And where else are we, the people who need it, going to get this research from?
That is a really good point. Other than some maybe academia institutions or
Mhm.
private funders picking this up, that's a really good point. I don't know where else they would do that.
And the problem with that is a lot of that, like the academia and things like that, rely on federal grants that have
Sure.
been withdrawn and they are no longer able to fund those programs. So again, there's still a lot of chaos happening from these Trump administration slash Elon Musk cuts, but there is work coming out to try to correct some of those, those issues. So I can't applaud the efforts because it shouldn't be needed. But at least something is being done to help correct it.
Yes. And these people are considered public safety positions. So as we are cutting things, maybe there needs to be some sort of earmark on public safety positions, whether it's in the ag industry or not.
That's a great idea. You would think somebody would have thought of that first, but maybe let's not cut all our public safety positions. But apparently they didn't think of that, and now they're going to fix it. All right. Well, we're going to take a break so I can take a breath. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. She's Lorrie Boyer. We'll be right back. We started out talking about the bird flu and about all of the Trump administration cuts and firings. They're trying to bring some people back. So that is good news. Now, what we're seeing a lot is a lot of back and forth happening, and that is not new in the ag industry. And the next thing that we're going to talk about has seen a lot of that in the last few months, and that's the Corporate Transparency Act. We're now seeing another flip. So this is something where first you had to file this form with the government to say who was involved in your business, and then it was stopped and you didn't, and then you did and you didn't and you didn't. Where are we at now, Lori?
Yeah, that's a great segue. A lot of back and forth because this is a prime example of back and forth. And I have to focus on this to really keep up with this, to be honest with you. But the US Treasury Department has just come out with a new deadline. So let me fill you in on how this is working. As you and I've talked about this before, there have been several different cases of litigation with the courts going back and forth on this. And it does apply to farms. So I just want to be clear that it does really matter to the ag industry. I'm just going to give you the background. On Wednesday, February 19th, the Treasury did update its Financial Crimes Enforcement Network website. And so you can find this information on that website, by the way. It says that most companies now have a March 21st deadline to file their beneficial ownership information. This came about because of a February 18th decision by the U.S. District Court for Eastern District of Texas that said that, yes, we do need to file under FinCEN. This department posted that the BOI, I love all these acronyms here, requirements under this Corporate Transparency Act are back in effect. And again, a new deadline is coming up on March 21st. Now, whether or not we see this flipped again, because we do have some other litigation that is still hanging out there, I don't know. But the latest Corporate Transparency Act filings required are on the requirement. It needs to be done by March 21st. That it does include a lot of smaller businesses, including a lot of farms and ranches here in the U.S.
So a little less than a month away is the new deadline to get that paperwork filled in. Now, I own a small business that has nothing to do with agriculture, nothing to do with broadcasting or anything like that either. But my husband and I own a small business, and it is an LLC. And so we've been paying attention to this on a personal level or a personal business level as well. And honestly, it's been so confusing. And, we don't even have any employees or anything. It's a tiny little business. I can only imagine what our farms are going through with this. It's like a tennis match, back and forth, back and forth. How can you make plans for your business when you don't know exactly what's going to happen? But I did at one point, the last time that this was on, I went online and looked at the paperwork. I didn't submit it, but I actually had it all filled out at one point. It's not a difficult thing to do. It literally took me 5 minutes. But
Okay, well,
the problem isn't so much the workload of filling out this paper. The problem is a lot of businesses don't want the government to have that information. For us, I don't see it as a big deal because they already know my husband and I own this business. So our corporate transparency, that there it is. Sabrina and Rusty Halvorson own this business. I don't know, and I don't have a problem with giving that information to the government, but I can understand why if you've got a agriculture business or any other business where you've got multiple owners, and maybe for whatever reason you don't want the government to have that information. That's where this battle back and forth in the court has come up.
Yeah. And it's good to know that it didn't take you that much time, because that has been one of the pushback notes, is the time that it would take for a business to do this. But also on that same note, don't you just do it once? Like it's once and you're done, right?
I believe so. Yeah, I didn't see anything that said you had to refile every year or anything like that. Maybe if there's an ownership change, I can see it needed to be filed
Yeah,
again, but I
that's what
didn't
it
even
is.
read
Yeah.
that. That's just kind of logic. Of course, there's not a whole lot of logic in government, but my personal opinion.
We're sure seeing
And that,
that right now, I'll tell you.
yeah, but that's true under any administration since the invention of government, I'm sure. But, I think a lot of it comes down to personal rights to not have to give out information. From a consumer standpoint, though, I absolutely understand why we want corporate transparency, especially if I'm spending money someplace. I believe in supporting things with my money, or not supporting things by not giving them money. So I would want to know if certain people are involved in businesses. So from a consumer standpoint, I completely get it.
Also, I just was thinking about this when I was reading through that. Does most businesses. So that alludes to the fact that there's exemptions. I have not taken the time to look at what those would be, and I'm not sure how that works out, but there are some exemptions apparently. The other thing I do want to point out, according to what I'm seeing as far as information from the Treasury Department, they will continue to assess their options to further modified deadlines. So that tells me that this deadline could possibly change again. So they're leaving themselves open to modifications.
True. Have we seen the last of it in the courts? I don't think so. There's probably going to be more.
Yes. Yeah, it is free to file. However, companies that fail to file will have penalties of up to $591 a day.
Jeez. Oh my goodness. I didn't realize it was a day. All
A
right, I'm going to go
day,
back
yeah.
and fill out that paperwork because that's more than my company makes in a year. So we go to Chuck Zimmerman, who was at the recent Cattle Industry Convention and Trade Show, CattleCon 2025. Here's Chuck Zimmerman.
At CattleCon 2025, I'm visiting with Kent Backus. And Kent, why don't you first of all tell folks what you do for NCBA?
So I'm the Executive Director of Government Affairs, and I work on all of our international trade issues and our tax issues.
Well, you got the two words that I wanted to talk about, and, with tariffs, trade, there's a lot going on with it right now. Maybe you could just talk about what we've seen already starting with this new administration, and what's the outlook?
Well, I think it's been refreshing to see an administration want to really take on robust trade policy. And for the last 4 years, it's been fairly dormant. There have been a few things that we've been able to, a few victories we've been able to scratch up. But this is an administration that is really putting everything out there from the get-go. And so it's been rather exciting. If you look at what's happened over the weekend, the threat of tariffs on Canada and Mexico to effect change on the fentanyl crisis. It's not any surprise that the president would want to use tariffs as a negotiating tool. He did that in the previous administration, and honestly, he did it very effectively. We saw access to China, Japan. We resolved a lot of issues with the European Union, and while it creates a lot of uncertainty and makes people uncomfortable, it can be effective when used strategically, and I think he's proven that for cattle producers. So, over the weekend, with this being directed at Canada and Mexico, it certainly caused a lot of uncertainty within our trade partners and our contacts within Canada and Mexico. But as we told them, we're like, look, there's a lot of moving parts here. We know that this is a president that knows how to use these tools effectively, and we're also fully aware of what would happen to our industry if this were to go forward. We were pleased to see that this was resolved. There's a 30-day delay on those tariffs. Mexico and Canada have committed to sending their troops and guards to the border to help address the fentanyl issues and the border security issues. And for the short time, we're in a good spot. At the same time, that's been directed at China. Those 10% tariffs have been implemented. China's a much bigger issue overall. The Chinese responded. They've targeted with tariffs of their own on our liquid natural gas, some of our coal, and also crude oil. They've targeted other U.S. companies, and there are some things like that we'll pay attention to. But even before that, China was already causing issues for us because they are doing a study right now of whether they should implement a beef safeguard, which would restrict how much we could send there. So this is not something that's being instigated or initiated by the president. This is a response to a lot of policies on the United States, and that's what makes people uncomfortable. Is anytime you want to shake up the status quo, or in this case, kind of stand up for yourself, then other people get very uncomfortable with that. But we've got close communications with the administration, and we're optimistic that we're going to be able to see some productive change for cattle producers down the line.
Besides that, are there any other elements of trade that you're working on, or is this really just kind of the all-encompassing?
Well, this is the issue du jour by all means. But we're also looking at there are some concerns about the rise of imports, and not necessarily from a competition side, but where some of those imports are coming from, and that's something NCBA's been front and center on for a long time, and specifically with Brazil and Paraguay. The previous administration, despite our objections and our science-based reasons to not open the market to those countries, chose to do that anyway, and in many ways for geopolitical reasons. We've had serious concerns about the ongoing animal health issues, the lack of integrity of the central competent authority or the USDA counterpart there in Brazil, their inability or unwillingness to report animal diseases has been alarming. But Secretary Vilsack did not act on that. Even though we sent repeated requests to send auditors to Brazil, to Paraguay, to look and to review these things and not just take their word for it, but to actually go down and verify it. So you look at that, and that's a big concern. And if you look at what has resulted from that, Brazil has a growing presence in this market, but it doesn't mean that their integrity has improved at all. And so we're rewarding that behavior, and Brazil is sending a lot of beef north. And, while that is important that we have lean trimmings to help with the ground beef, it's important that we're importing that from quality, trusted trade partners. So that is something that we're going to continue to engage with the administration on, is to go back and address these concerns, because they haven't gone away. And if you look at the quota that Brazil and Paraguay ship under, they filled that thing in the first 2 weeks of this year. 65,000 metric tons in the first 2 weeks. And now they're going to pay a tariff of 26.4% for the rest of the year. But guess what? They can absorb it because their dollar is much weaker, their exports are cheaper, and they've pushed a lot of their competition out of the market. So this is not a problem that's going away. At the same time, we have a significant trade imbalance with Australia. We are still waiting to gain access to that market. That is something we know that the previous administration was working diligently to try to move and was unable to. So Australia, this is a big market for them. This is the time to address those concerns, because guess what? We've had a trade agreement with them for 20 years, and we're still not sending an ounce of fresh beef into that market. So there are big issues that need to be addressed.
Well, you guys have your hands full this year, that's for sure. And I really appreciate you taking some time and bringing us up to date on some of these issues. So here from CattleCon 2025, I'm Chuck Zimmerman.
We will continue with reports from CattleCon 2025. We continue now from the Cattle Industry Convention held recently in Denver. Here's Chuck Zimmerman.
At CattleCon 2025, I am visiting with Tanner. First of all, tell me, Tanner, your name and what you do for NCBA.
My name's Tanner Beamer. I'm the Executive Director of Government Affairs for NCBA. I work on primarily the cattle markets and appropriations portfolios, but there's a couple other things intermixed in there just as the need arises.
Looking at a new administration, what are some of the things that you specifically are working on as we move forward this year?
Well, for one thing, I think the first thing we need to do is just get the lights turned back on. You know, we didn't get a whole lot accomplished during the last 4 years, at least from a regulatory perspective. So I think that just having people at the agencies that are given the latitude to go and work on behalf of the American people is critically huge. For me, first and foremost, I would like to see USDA start to roll back some of the Packers and Stockyards rulemakings that have come out under the Biden administration, which are just going to make it that much more difficult for producers to access marketing channels that reward them for desirable traits exhibited in the meat. That's going to be first on my list to see what happens over at USDA. And kind of along with that, right, Packers and Stockyards is an agency that's very small within USDA, and they have experienced a lot of staff turnover over the last several years, and they have a very defined core mission area. They are supposed to go out and watch the dealings of packers, administer the packer and dealer statutory trusts. They're also supposed to watch registered dealers and bonded dealers, and those are things that they have been doing less and less effectively since they have been so focused on implementing this Biden administration agenda item so aggressively. Now that that's gone, I'd like to see them go back to providing real services to the producers that they're supposed to be serving.
The work that you're going to be doing now kind of sets you up for the summer meeting to actually make some final of your policy book. What are some of the top of the mind ones that people are really asking about maybe?
So Packers and Stockyards is a big one for us right now for the reasons that we just talked about. But in addition to that, you know, just from zooming out of Washington, D.C. and maybe zooming back in on Chicago, there's been a lot of activity going on at the CME group, right? And seeing how they are undergoing a live cattle contract review right now. They do that periodically with a lot of their physically delivered contracts just to make sure that it's working properly, to make sure that we don't need to update or modernize the contract. Well, the cattle business looks a lot different today than it did 60 years ago when we first launched the live cattle futures contract. And so as a result of that, we have to keep asking ourselves, is the contract evolving in such a way that it is actually meeting people's needs, not just for us as the hedger or the commercial user of the contract, but also for those that are out there that are taking delivery of the product as well. So that contract review is going to kind of come out with some recommendations later in the summer. In addition to that, too, we're watching this deal with the daily price limits. That's the maximum amount up or down that the market can move in the course of a single day. Historically, that was a static limit of $3 in live cattle, $4.50 in feeder cattle. And about 5 years ago, CME put us on a formula-based system that resets annually. And that formula kicks out a limit that is a function of where price level is. So if you think back to where we were price level-wise in 2020 and zoom forward to where we are today, the limit is now is $6.50, which is an improvement over $7.50, which is what we started this cycle with. CME listened to our feedback and implemented that temporary measure to bring the limits down a little bit. But that's a huge gap, and a gap in a contract that, by and large, trades pretty consistently within a certain range that is less than $2.
Before we close, anything else you'd like to say about the work that you're doing that we did touch on?
You know, the biggest thing that we are watching legislatively in Washington right now is what's going to happen with this reconciliation package. So reconciliation is literally just a procedural maneuver that Congress utilizes essentially to get around the 60-vote threshold in the Senate and avoid people filibustering it to death. Congress can only do so many of those in the course of a calendar year. The most recent time that Congress used that process was to implement the the Inflation Reduction Act. So that is something that we're going to be mindful of, because the way that they go about doing that is they'll utilize all of the committee chairs and all of the ranking members from all of the committees in the Senate and the House that deal with authorizing issues. So everybody will have a bite at the apple. Now, we know for a fact that the basis of that is going to be tax reform and preserving a lot of the tax provisions that Trump got enacted during the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. We also know there will probably be some national security provisions on there, some things dealing with the border issue and illegal immigration. But just about anything can make it into a budget reconciliation. Now, the Senate is required to, we call it the Byrd Rule, after Senator Robert Byrd from West Virginia. The Senate is not allowed to place extraneous policy issues onto a budget reconciliation bill. But extraneous is a very loose definition, and that is enforced largely through procedural hurdles in the Senate. And so a lot of fans of parliamentary procedure will love to watch the floor during this reconciliation discussion. But we're mostly just monitoring to make sure that whatever these provisions that get thrown on there, we keep harmful provisions out. Things like the OFF Act that attack the beef checkoff, and other things that are animal rights agendas, and they keep trying to push that on there.
Well, you guys have your hands full in a new administration year here, so best of luck with that. And thank you very much, Tanner, for visiting with me here. We're at CaliCon 2025. I'm Chuck Zimmerman.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Sabrina Halvorson.
This segment is brought to you by UPL. We're talking today with Cassandra Reeser, Technical Service Manager for UPL. All right, Cassandra, we're talking about botrytis and whole rot today. So what makes botrytis and whole rot such challenging diseases for almond growers?
So they both can make a pretty severe and detrimental impact on the economics of almonds for almond growers, ultimately yield. But what makes botrytis really hard to control is, I would say, the timing of the disease. A lot of times this is going to happen early in the season during bloom when it's cool, rainy weather. So you really have to, as a grower, time your fungicide sprays according to the weather. So you really want to make sure you have those fragile blooms protected prior to cold, rainy weather. And then as soon as you can get back into the field, making sure you can reapply a fungicide and make sure you have some reach back, some curative activity for any disease that did get into those blooms or those petals. So that makes botrytis pretty difficult to control if your timing is off as far as whether or not you can get into your own fields. And whole rot actually acts a little bit later into the season. And the difficulty with whole rot is it's not just one fungus that's affecting the disease. It's usually a complex of either 2 or 3 diseases or fungal pathogens of Rhizopus stolonifer, monolinea, and sometimes aspergillus.
As we move into bloom, is there anything that growers should be scouting for, or any conditions that may be more favorable to outbreaks of botrytis or whole rot?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, cool, rainy weather is pretty much what we've been having currently in California this year. A lot of farmers have either already done their bloom spray just because we're right in the middle of bloom. So a lot of the growers are proactive. They're out in their fields and they've been able to get some protection on those blooms already. And then following bloom, they're really looking at preventing against those summer diseases. So really looking at the weather, making sure there's no more rain in the forecast, and watching the temperatures and make sure that there isn't an elongated cold period as well.
All right. And are there any other diseases that growers should be scouting for or thinking about right now?
Yeah, so as we go into the summertime season of almonds, we're looking for any wood injuries that might have happened because of freezes. We could be scouting for, say, alternarius, making sure that our canopy in our almonds is pruned, there's airflow. And if you have an orchard that is pretty locked in, maybe pruning is every other row, and you have rows that lack airflow, just making sure that you have that leaf tissue covered with a fungicide, looking for alternaria, looking for anthracnose, scab, and just looking for where you lack airflow and where some fungal pathogens might want to grow. So really just keeping an eye out for those trouble spots. And then of course, keeping an eye on the weather, and making sure there's no more rain in the forecast.
What are your recommendations for an effective fungicide solution for these diseases in almonds?
Yeah, we talked about how difficult, say, hull rot and alternaria can be. It's a complex of different pathogens. So really what growers want to focus on is making sure they mix up their mode of actions, their frac groups, using your 7, 9s, 11s, and 3s, and making sure that you have a rotational frac group mode of action in your tank, just so you can make sure that you can touch on all of those pathogens out in the field with as many frac groups as possible. And of course, UPL is so excited to be able to offer a brand new frac code into the mix, frac group 52, and that is in our new fungicide for almonds called Axios 20SC. So really what we're here to do is provide another tool in the toolbox for growers, because they're always going through their 3, 9s, 11, and 7 frac codes in their tanks. And so the fact that we can add a brand new frac code with no cross resistance with those other frac groups, we're just really excited to be able to add another effective frac group to their toolbox.
For our listeners who would like more information, where can they find that?
Yeah, of course. So of course, they can always go through and talk to their UPL sales representative, and they can also go to our website, which has changed. It is uplcorp.com/US.
And you can also get more information on this again on our website at agnetwest.com. We're wrapping up our day today with some agriculture news. Canada's government is preparing for bird flu. Dennis Guy reports from Canada.
The Canadian government has purchased 500,000 human vaccine doses of H5N1 strain to ensure that Canada is ready for such a health threat. Canada had its first reported domestically acquired human case of avian influenza in November. The purchase of the vaccine by the Canadian government is seen as a proactive step to prepare for the threat of a spread into the human population. The Public Health Agency of Canada says its supply of GSK's human vaccine will be split up, with 60% of the available doses going to provinces and territories, while the remaining 40% will be kept in the federal stockpile inventory at Ottawa. At the same time, as normal seasonal human influenza cases increase, health officials are also monitoring a growing possibility, a potential fusion of human and bird flu strains. When viruses mix, the result could give rise to a new pathogen. Dr. Cheyenne Sharif is an immunology professor at the University of Guelph. Sharif warns that a person who is experiencing seasonal flu symptoms should not work with or be in close proximity to poultry flocks when that person is not feeling well.
The virus is still trying to adapt, and I think this is a good time for us to really disrupt its life cycle and make sure that it doesn't get adapted further to mammals.
Seasonal human flu cases are always on the rise at this time of the year, and as the spring bird migration ramps up, there is always the potential for more cases of avian influenza in domestic poultry flocks. So the more cases of human flu that are out there, the more likely it is that the virus could mix with the bird flu, creating a new virus. This according to Matthew Miller, the director of the DeGroote Institute for Infectious Disease Research at McMaster University in Hamilton.
That process is how all prior flu pandemics that we're aware of in the past have started. 2 different influenza viruses infect one host. The avian flu might maintain the severe disease that it causes, but gain the ability to spread well between humans the way that seasonal flu can.
The Public Health Agency of Canada says that risk to the general public remains low. Human infections with avian influenza is rare and usually occurs after close contact with infected birds. Still, McMaster's Matthew Miller agrees with Dr. Cheyenne Sharif. This is the time of the year that normal seasonal flu viruses are most common, and if you are feeling the effects of normal seasonal flu, it is best that you stay away from poultry flocks.
The more human flu that's out there, the more probable it is that that human flu could mix with a bird flu and create a new virus.
Reporting from Canada, I'm Dennis Guy.
The latest ag numbers are in for 2024. So what did the past agricultural trade year look like after USDA received its December ag trade numbers as part of its monthly update? Rod Bain tells us.
The final ag trade numbers for 2024 are in. USDA's February agricultural trade update features December trade data for the prior year, as well as completion of the 2024 trade year. As Agriculture Department economist James Kaufman notes,
the 2024 calendar year ag exports $176 billion, which is 1% over 2023. Ag imports for the full year were $213 billion, which is 9% above 2023.
The result, a continuing, growing ag trade imbalance.
Imports exceeded exports by $21 billion in 2023. That gap has grown to $37 billion in 2024.
Looking at month-over-month ag trade data,
December ag exports were at $16.2 billion, which is 4% above the previous December. And December ag imports were $18.3 billion, or 17% over last December.
A further look at the latest ag trade update includes a breakdown of our nation's farm and food exports by commodities in the final month of 2024. And how that adds to the year-over-year totals.
Growth was most significant in horticultural products, especially tree nuts, but also vegetables and fruits. Tree nuts were up 11%, especially due to almonds. 2024 export values of grains and feeds grew 2% over 2023 to $39.3 billion, which was led by rice and corn. Red meat values also grew 5% to $20.4 billion, largely on higher prices. Ethanol value was up 13%, driven largely by increased volumes. Conversely, soybean export values fell 12% to $24.5 billion. Cotton was also down, ending the year 16% lower than 2023.
And what were some of the factors behind the growth in farm imports last year?
Import growth has been largely associated with consumer goods, such as fruits and processed foods and processed beverages. The very strong dollar and the strong economy has helped to drive that growth. Commodity groups that have had especially strong import growth included tropical products such as cocoa, which grew 31% over the previous year, and coffee, which grew at 12%. Growth in both of these was due largely to very high commodity prices.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
That's our show for today. This has been the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson.
Get more information on the topics you heard today. Visit AgNet West at agnetwest.com. You can also stay connected by following us on our social media at AgNet West on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Also look for Sabrina Halvorson on Facebook, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast by searching for AgNet West on your podcast app. Thank you for listening to the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. AgNet West Radio Network, your primary choice for agriculture news.